time for another Marvel Legends Build-A-Figure review, and I'm really excited because this week I'm going to be taking a look at the Controller Build-A-Figure. Now this figure was on my top 10 list. This is one of my most wanted Marvel Legends figures. This character tends to be associated as an Iron Man villain. He did make his first appearance in 1969 in Iron Man 12, and he's come back to menace various Marvel heroes across the years. But he tends to be considered more of an obscure character, one of the ones that tends to be more forgotten. But I really like this character. I've always really liked his powers. I've always really liked his look and design. There's something very menacing about this character, and I think he's a lot of fun. So he was highly anticipated for me, and I was really glad when he was announced. As with pretty much any character in the Marvel Universe, he's had a couple of different looks across the years, but surprisingly, they've never really deviated too much from his original first appearance, and most long-term fans would agree that his most definitive look is probably from the 70s, and this is certainly my personal favourite version of his costume and outfit, and this is what I always tend to think of when I think of the Controller. So really pleased that we have this version of the character, and just fantastic to finally have him in our collection. But of course, he is a Build-A-Figure, and with that fact, we know, of course, that we're not just buying one figure, we're having to commit to buying an entire wave, more or less. In this case, of course, we had 6 figures we had to buy. Thankfully, we didn't have to buy the Iron Man if you didn't want to, but you had to buy all 6 if you wanted to get the individual pieces that made up the Controller. Now, long-time viewers will know I'm not a huge fan of this approach because it's rare that there's an entire wave that I really want to collect, and of course it is undoubtedly a marketing technique to make sure that figures of characters that might not have had the same broad appeal or have sold as well as other characters now sell just as strongly as some of the top tier characters and figures. And if you're not hugely interested in some of these figures but you really want the Build-A-Figure, then you're having to commit an awful lot of money to be able to build the one figure that you want. That's why I'm a huge advocate of the deluxe figure approach. I'd rather pay £30–40, whatever it might be, for the figure that I actually want, rather than having to pay closer to £200 and end up with, say, 5 or 6 figures that I'm not really interested in, just to get the one figure I do actually want. And here, I've got to be completely honest, I wasn't really that fussed about a great many of the figures in this line. Either I'd already got previous releases of previous variants of these characters, or I just wasn't really into these characters or this version of these characters in this set. But without further ado, let's take a look at the figure himself and see if he's worth it. First of all, you may be familiar with this body mould, and that is because they have for the most part recycled the Thanos Infinity Gauntlet figure. The head sculpt, of course, is brand new though, and I think they've done a fantastic job with this. There's a lot of detail here, which is fantastic. We can see all those individual scars on the face there, which look really cool, and I think they've complemented it with a really nice paint job as well. We can see lots of shading, particularly around the eyes there, and it looks really menacing and pretty creepy all around. Also, I really like the use of the blue metallic paint that they've used on the head and particularly on the shoulder piece there, and it runs throughout the gauntlets and the boots as well. It's just got that slight metallic sheen which catches the light and adds an extra texture to this figure. As I mentioned, anyone who'd already previously bought the Thanos Infinity Gauntlet figure that was released a couple of years ago will recognise this body mould, and I think it's been used a few other times as well. So there's no real surprises here. It was a perfect fit for the Controller. They do have a very similar costume, and I think it works perfectly well here. I really do like this paint scheme. I think they've done a really good job of it. Obviously, it's just 2 tones of blue, but there is also a white wash running through key muscle groups as well, just to give it that little bit of extra texturing, which I think works really quite well here. And as I said, I really do like this use of the metallic blue running through the darker blue areas on this costume. I also really like the sculpting of the hands, in particular this right hand, which actually has the controller discs in his palm there. I think this is really cool. Obviously, it is specific to this character. It's a very nice touch, and there's an extra little detail which is really fun. But even the left hand with that open palm, again, we have some nice texturing there on the palm. We can see that sort of gradient detail in there, which I think is really cool, that extra grip that he's got, and I think it just looks really nice. Now, the boots also look to be quite different to the boots that we got on the Thanos figure. I feel like I've seen these somewhere before, but I can't place where, so I might be wrong on that. But again, they're entirely appropriate for the Controller here, and I think they look really good. The articulation scheme, as you would expect for a Marvel Legends figure, is pretty excellent. He does have a ball joint in the head, which means he can spin his head 360 degrees, he can bend it left to right, and of course he can nod it up and down as well. He's got chunky ball joints in the shoulders, and thankfully there is no hindrance from that shoulder pad there as well, which is great. It works very, very well with that articulation. He's also got complementary bicep swivel as well, and there is a pin swivel at the elbow, meaning that lower arm can rotate 360 degrees and it can hinge a little bit forwards and backwards. I wouldn't say it bends to 90 degrees by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a little bit of movement here, which is good. There's another pin swivel at the wrist, meaning that wrist can rotate all the way around, and of course it hinges a pretty good distance. Then he's got a swivel at the waist so he can spin from side to side, and of course he has that upper ab crunch as well, meaning he can bend forwards and backwards. He's got ball joints in the hips, of course those legs kick out to the side. There's an upper thigh swivel as well, and of course the legs kick forwards and backwards, and there is a double jointed knee which can bend that lower leg all the way to his back there, which is great. And then finally he has an ankle pivot at the ankle, so his foot can hinge forwards and backwards and pivot from side to side. All this and what's more, they also found time to include a couple of extras, a pair of alternate closed fists. So in terms of scale, here he is next to his arch nemesis Iron Man for a height comparison. As you can see, the controller clearly dominates this space and towers above this 6-inch Iron Man figure. This looks to be pretty appropriate. This seems quite nicely balanced. This is what I tend to think of as being the size difference in the comic books, so this looks pretty good. Here he is next to the Thing, and as you can see, he's still head and shoulders above the Thing. This is nice to see that he's still got the edge over one of the larger Marvel Legends figures, so this is pretty cool. But he's still smaller than one of the other Builder figures such as Onslaught. So again, this looks entirely appropriate. This seems to scale quite nicely and quite accurately, and I think this works really well. And then finally, here he is next to MODOK. Again, MODOK obviously has the added flames there, which has given him extra elevation, extra height. I'm not sure about the dimensions. MODOK maybe looks a little bit too big here, but I think this is still roughly in the right arena. And as you can see, there's plenty of opportunities to be able to put this figure in dynamic displays and different poses to create really fun dioramas. I really like how he scales against other figures in this line, particularly because there are various different height differences in this collection now. Definitely creates a huge variety and a rich texture to this collection and this world. So then, final thoughts from me. Well, first off, I'm going to give this figure 4 stars. I really, really like this figure, and I think I gave the Thanos figure, which is very, very close, 3 stars, and a lot of that I think had to do with anticipation and what I was expecting from that figure. And although I did really like it, I did feel, I had mixed feelings towards it, let's put it that way. However, with Controller, I feel like he delivers everything that I could possibly want, and I feel like he's actually surpassed my expectations because I've thrown in a couple of extra goodies that I wasn't expecting. The extra fists, for example, wasn't something you'd expect to get with a Builder figure, which is fantastic. I think they've done a really nice job of him. I think the costume is pitch perfect. I really like the use of paint apps, which give him much needed texture and detail, and I really like the sculpt. I think the head sculpt's fantastic, and I really like those control discs on his hands as well. So I think they've done a really great job. Obviously, when it comes to articulation, as you would expect, it's pretty much perfect. I couldn't really ask for much more. The only criticism I might have of the articulation would be the elbow articulation, where the arm doesn't seem to really hinge as high up as I might like, but all in all, I think they've done a really good job, and I think this is a really solid figure. Now, the big question is he worth buying all 6 figures to build? Well, that ultimately depends on how you feel about those other 6 figures. If you're even mildly curious about them, then I think it's probably worth picking them up to build him. He's fantastic. But if you're really completely disinterested and you don't really want to throw down close to 150 or 200 pounds for the Controller figure, and who could blame you, then I would recommend hunting him down on the secondary market. You'll probably have to throw down a bit more than you would for a deluxe figure, but it's going to save you a lot more money in the long run. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.